is Radhika Nathan, the author of A Time to Burnish. And welcome, Miss Radhika. How have you been
you.
doing during these crazy times?
Thank you. It's great to talk to you again, Didi. This is wonderful. Yeah, these are unsettling times at a global level. Millions of people are at home. But I should say that predominantly the feeling that I have, the emotion I have, is that of gratitude, because I have a roof over my head. I have food, more than enough to eat, and I have a job, a full time job. So I think about millions of people who don't know whether they're going to get their next meals, how they're going to feed their family. There are people who are ill, not just because of the virus, but also other illness who don't have access to hospitals. There are people, domestic abuse victims who are now forced to stay at home. There's like so many difficult circumstances people are in, and when I think about it, I'm just very, very grateful for what I have, and I'm okay. I'm doing okay, and every day morning I'm thankful for what I have. As far as the day to day is concerned, I have a job, so it's like keeping me occupied. And Other than working full time, I also now have my chores to do, my home
Yeah,
chores to do. I think that's something that a lot of people are going through, where you don't have extra childcare support, you don't have any domestic help, so you have to do all of those as well. My mom and my husband share the work. To be very honest, I think they do a little more than I do, and I also. I sort of, I'm a person who's often in my head. I'm thinking about things, but doing chores kind of pulls you into the here and now. It's very good from a mindfulness perspective. I read this, coincidentally before the lockdown. I read this funny little book. It's by a monk. It's about how to keep your house and mind clean. It's some Japanese Buddhism related book. So I was just thinking about it the other day as I was like wiping down the counter. It gives you a sudden sense of, you know, false sense perhaps of a sense of accomplishment, a sense of control. So that's kind of how I do my chores, and that's kind of how I've been, managing the staying at home. Like I said earlier, it's not too terrible for me. So I'm able to manage, and I have in the past, done my own chores and things like that. So I actually like doing physical work because it kind of, like I said, it kind of grounds you and it kind of connects you to your surroundings. So from that perspective, I'm okay. Although, to be honest, I would love to be doing those. I see these beautiful coffee concoctions that people put up in Instagram, and habits they've picked up, and masks that they have sewn, and all that. I would love to do all those things, but honestly, I'm quite occupied with
yeah.
these two things itself. So that's kind of how the time in the lockdown is passing for me.
Yeah, I know in some ways, like when you were talking about doing your chores and how it makes you come, brings you back to the moment that you're living in. I find all my chores, like especially doing the dishes or dusting or something, those are the times when I can actually think on things. I don't know if it's true for anybody else or not. I find those are the times when I can sort out my mind in a way. And if I need to be out of my mind, I need to go and cook because I'm so clumsy. I have to focus on cooking and not burning myself. So those things are very helpful these days, especially because I'm not used to having people at home
Yeah,
24/7. Now I'm stuck with people
but
who
yeah,
want
no,
to
that's
do their own thing, but I'm like, no. Like for instance, I had to shut my husband in the bedroom and tell him that don't come out, I don't want you to be in the background of the video. asking me for tea. So yeah, so that is also there. But there are things that we can do to keep ourselves sane, and luckily we, you and me, we have something very much in common, that is books. You write them and I read them.
I
But I
I
know that
also
you
read
are
a
a,
lot. Yeah, I also
yeah,
read a lot.
I know that you're a very voracious reader. So I was just wondering if you could recommend some books that people uh, should read uh, while they have this extra bit of time at home, for those who have that extra bit of time at home.
Yeah. No, so I think I'm always up for sharing about the books that I would like to recommend. I still kind of identify myself more as a reader than a writer. Although off late, I'm seeing a little bit of watching more visual stuff. So I am kind of wondering about splitting my, maybe I'm doing a little more of the on-screen thing than I would like. But so there are always these classics and my all-time favorites which I have talked about in the past. So I thought maybe I could share with you a few books that I'm reading right now, and then so some of them are things that I'm liking as I'm reading. So maybe that could be my recommendation for others. Um, so I'm someone who typically don't stick to one book at a time. I have like I'm parallelly reading 3 or 4 books. So because it depends on my interest on that particular day, on my mood that particular day. So I typically start multiple books and then make progress on all of those books over a period. So from that perspective, I have 3 or 4 books that I'm currently reading. So maybe I could talk a little bit about that. Um, there's this book I picked up at the Bangalore Lit Fest. It's called How India Became Democratic. It's a very interesting book. It's about the first elections, in India, and how they prepare the electorate, and I mean the actual voter list. And this is, obviously many years ago, when they didn't have assistance in terms of computers, in terms of telecommunications, and it was it half. I mean, many people in the population were illiterate. And how do you prepare the voter list for the first time? And it's amazing. And I've always been very proud of the fact that India is a young country, but from the beginning, we had votes for women. We've always tried to do the right thing from a constitution perspective. So I've always been very proud of that. And this book is kind of making me feel even more, and I'm
Patriotic.
kind of amazed. Yeah, and I'm quite amazed at what efficiency can achieve even with very little resources. And tying it back to what's happening now. India is not a very rich country, and everyone talks about coronavirus testing and all of that, right? But we have to think about our population, the context of our country, and then how we can apply the testing. And I think India is doing a great job. I mean, even simple things, right? Like putting squares and making sure people stand on those squares. These are very low tech ideas, but we are applying all those things. We are trying to figure out ways to reinforce some of these things to people. And we talk about masks. Maybe not everyone will get it. We'll make cloth masks. We will, those are the kind of things that I've always been very proud of being in India. We think of all these other ways to handle adversities. So that's a book that I would
Jugar,
recommend. Jugad,
what
yes,
we
yes,
call jugar.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
We are
Um,
really good at that.
yeah, and so that's a book that I would recommend. And then this is another book that I actually finished this book just now, yesterday. It's called That Will Never Work. And this book is about Netflix. With a lot of people at home, everyone is watching, Prime and Netflix and whatnot, right? So this book is about sort of how Netflix was started, and it's a very interesting book. The first CEO, he talks about how he and how it's all about entrepreneurship and starting your own thing. I've always been fascinated by people who take risks and start their own company and things like that. So it was a very interesting read for me. So that's a book that I would like to recommend. And then my daughters actually presented my mom a book which I have picked up now. It's called The Power of Nunchi. It's
The power of.
Nunchi, Nunchi. It is a
Okay.
it's apparently a Korean concept, where it's about this innate understanding you have when you walk into a room. You kind of have this it's somewhat instinct about a person. You kind of are better in reading body language. You kind of are better in figuring out about the person. So this book talks about that those kind of qualities. And we think my daughters and I think my mom has that quality. So we my daughters gave this as a gift to my mom, so I'm reading that book. And then the fourth one, I picked up this book months ago. It's called A Southern Music. It's about Carnatic music by Jim Krishna. I picked this up months ago, but for some reason I kind of abandoned the book. I love the topic. I've wanted to read about it, but somehow I just abandoned it. Now I've picked it up again, and I've started reading that one. And then the last book that I'm going to go back and it's not something that I'm reading right now, but it's my all-time favorite. But it's very timely. I feel is The Martian. I love these. I love these, sci-fi type books. But I think this Martian is very appropriate for now because it's about it's about the human spirit. It's about you're stuck at home or wherever it is, and outside there is adversary you don't know, and you somehow have to manage. And it's a very hopeful book. It's a very positive, hopeful book. And it's also somewhat unapologetically science oriented, which I like. So I would recommend that book. So those are my recommendations for the lockdown, or even for the weekend, I should say.
Yeah, I was about to, just before you brought up The Martian, I was going to say I'm sensing a very non-fiction theme over here. Let's get to some fiction part also for myself, for people like myself who prefer. It's not that I don't read non-fiction, but we prefer fiction, and especially in times like this when we need our mind to be, distracted in a way when we are reading. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
So I
Martian is
usually
certainly a book that I would say, when you said it's very relevant, and I was like, a lot of people are going to say that's Mars, we are facing virus, but yes, it is about survival in a way,
yeah,
hope,
yeah.
being hope, keeping the hope up and surviving.
Yeah, yeah, and I kind of like these, especially in such times. I think it's good to read books that are all about a positive message, because you're already under stress. I mean, the whole world is under stress. So it's important for us to kind of reinforce a positive message, reinforce a sense of hope. And I don't mean to trivialize it. I think there are a lot of people in deep distress right now, and I'm not. I mean, there is you can't just say something positive and fix it. I don't mean it that way, but at least I think that for the rest of us, it's okay. I mean, it's fine. We have food, we have roof, we can be hopeful, we can concentrate on those kind of messaging, and also do some charity for those who are in need. So that's why I like the Martian. Of course, you can always go back to the old romance classics and things like that, which kind of again makes you feel good. I did read a bunch of Georgette Hare, a few months ago. I went through this. I when I was growing up, I liked a lot of these mysteries, especially the women, writers, Agatha Christie, Dorothy Sayers, and all of those. And then I did another phase with Georgette Hare, so I went back and read a whole bunch of Georgette Hare as well. So if you ask me for fiction, that's what I would recommend.
That's she has some Regency romance, if I'm
Yeah,
not wrong.
yeah. Yeah,
Georgette
and
Hayes.
and her
Yeah.
and her books are very well researched, and it may not be fast paced, but kind of very well researched, beautiful language, and something that you can read at your own pace and thoroughly enjoy.
Mhm. So now I would like to ask you, like it's been like quite a while since A Time to Burnish had hit the markets. Is there something else cooking there?
And I it's unfortunately, I'm not a very disciplined writer, so I have these months when I don't write at all, and then I go through these bouts of energy, and then I write. Even for both the Mute Anklet as well as A Time to Burnish, the first 10,000 words took a really long time for me to write. So I think I'm in that mode now. I need to get out of it. So I've started doing a couple of things. One is I just wrote this sort of a remake. I shouldn't even call it a remake. It's kind of a makeover of Aladdin, the Aladdin and the Magic Lamp story. Um, I just felt like it needed an update, so I've just finished that. I'll probably put it in my blog in a couple of weeks after editing it. And then my family, my daughters reminded me that this is the April is the poetry month. So I was just trying my hands. So they've kind of you know not challenged, but they've kind of encouraged me to write at least 4 poems by the end of the month, once a week. So I'm trying to. I'm a very prose person. I've been always been afraid of trying my hands on poetry, but I love reading poetry, especially like that of A.K. Ramanujan. I just started writing a few that I'll probably put it up in Facebook or Instagram. I did put one yesterday in Facebook. So those are two things that I've been kind of what I would call as a warm up to my next novel. And I have two ideas that I'm toying with. I had originally thought of writing near something around the near past, like in the 80s, set in the 80s, but I've somehow lost interest in that. So I've the last 1 year, 1.5 years, I've been collecting a lot of reference material around World War II in the Pacific. So it's not so much about what's happening in Europe, Hitler, and all that, but what's happening closer to India, in the East, Southeast Asia. So I've been reading up a lot, and I have a plot that I'm working on. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe I was actually planning to take time off in the summer, like 10 days or something, and then write the first 10,000 words, and then I can polish it during the work week over the weekends. But now with all this, I don't know if I will be able to. But I do hope that at least by the end of the year I should have my first draft ready. That's kind of what I'm working on. I mean, I have got the characters in my head. I've got some basic plot going. But if you look at both my novels, it's not just historical or romance. There is also an element of mystery. I kind of like the mystery part of it as well. So the knot for the mystery is still not, it's not clicking for me. I have some things that I would like to play with, but I just need to get that part fixed, and then I should be able to make good progress. I do have my characters in my head. I have the flow of the novel. I have the growth of the characters. All of that already formulated in my head, but I still need to figure out the mystery part. And this is World War II, so I've got a lot of these World War II material. I'm also looking for. Interestingly, there's a lot of English material, but in both the books, in most both my first book as well as my second book, I found a lot of material which are in Indian languages, right? So that helped me a lot to get some perspective, because obviously I was writing about South India and things set in South India. So this time around also, I'm looking for material, written by people who lived in the 1940s, who actually were part of the, either in some way or some way connected to that, the World War II. So I'm kind of working on that. So I really hope to spend some time. Writing makes me feel good, so I do want to go back to writing.
Yeah, it sounds interesting because I've read Time to Burnish. I've yet to read The Mutant, but the thing that I liked about your book was that the history part was very Indian. The characters were very Indian, which a lot of people miss out on. They try to make it to appeal to the international market, then lose the Indianness, which you keep true to. And obviously, the mystery is a mystery.
Yeah, no, so
So this will be interesting to see because there are quite a few World War related mysteries that we know of, but on the top of my head, I cannot think of a single Indian one other than the about Netaji. Other
yeah,
than that, I cannot think of anything on the top of my head that's very Indian. But I'm sure
yeah.
there must be some things that you have looked up.
I have been, in fact, it's interesting that you bring up Netaji, because there is a lot of suspense and conspiracy theories and actual autobiographical or biographical information around him. But there's not a lot, there is not a lot of it connecting to the world, what is happening in the world at the time, the context of the times, and what was happening in India. And I'm roughly thinking about a slightly earlier time period, not closer to the freedom struggle, but I mean towards the end of the 40s, but more closer to. I think I will most likely set my story in 1941, 42. It will be before the Indian National Army, became as it was in the second half of the decade. And I kind of, if you were to look at both my novels, it's about, it's not an insider, right? It's an outsider trying to getting involved somehow in historical events, but kind of learning about the historical events as the novel progresses, right? So I think this one will also be like that, where I would like to use this novel and the protagonist's experience kind of connect to the broader things that were happening in the world at that time. So I haven't read any fiction around this yet, but I do have a lot of reference material that I've collected, that I'm reading. I'm like I said, I'm also looking for a lot of Indian material, maybe in translation if I don't understand the language. There is a lot in, especially I'm thinking about the eastern South India and Eastern India. So, a lot of those languages is what I'm looking for. But I see, for me, writing is fun. It is it's de-stressing. So I'm just going to have fun. That's all. I mean, whatever shape or form it eventually takes, I just hope to have fun reading about this period and making up characters.
Okay. It was fun talking to you today. Thank you for giving us your time. And for our viewers, I would like to remind you that Radhika's last book, A Time to Burnish, is still available on Kindle, and the Mute Anklet is on Kindle Unlimited. So you can check them out during this period of lockdown so that you have more to read. That's what we are aiming for, to provide you with more materials to read. And I hope you enjoyed the book recommendations. If you have any recommendations for others, feel free to comment them in the post, and we will make sure to get them out there for everybody else. Thank you, Ms. Radhika, for joining us, and stay safe.
Thank you so much, you two, and all the viewers as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.